All right, now we've identified what it is we don't know, and now we come to the research method, because now we need to find out, or by don't know, it could be that we need to develop something, and the question is, well, okay, we're going to develop it, or we need to design something, and you're going to do that. Now, I have a later talk or another talk on design science and action research, so just put that aside if you're going to do those two. Meanwhile, I'll continue as if it is a normal investigation. So here is where we're trying to discover something about the world. And the question is, well, how will you find out? So you really ought to match the research method with what it is you need to find out. So what are the elements? I mean, how big, how much, how important? And what are the relationships among them? So the elements, their attributes, and the relationships. Now, the things that you need to deal with are the threats to validity, because the validity is the validity of what you conclude, the validity of your results. How true is it? How reliable is it? How much can we trust this? So how will anybody know? How can anybody be confident of your findings? And we have three main validities. There's construct validity, which is, does your model of the elements and their relationships make sense? Is it a true model? The internal validity is the data quality, essentially, of the evidence you gather. So if your data has been corrupted or it's been improperly collected, then your data quality is likely to be low. Your internal validity is low. The external validity is, all right, you investigated this problem in a particular environment and circumstances. How generalizable is that? Is that a general solution to the problem, or is that a specific solution to a specific problem that is not very useful elsewhere? So let's deal with those three as we go through. All right? Construct validity. How well have you modeled the problem? And that the formally expresses the degree to which the explanatory concepts derived from theory account for performance on a measure. So that probably explains it reasonably well. I mean, I'm sorry if it's not that evident to you. It's very obvious and straightforward to me. The problems that come up time and time again is that often there are spurious elements, or there are missing elements. So spurious elements are a big problem. We include things in the model that aren't really necessary. Internal validity, usually not a major problem, but can be a problem in things like clinical trials or mass surveys. So were the data gathered correctly? Okay, so the threats we can have in there, we can have selection bias. Now if you're going to gather some data by asking your friends, then there's a selection bias. You're asking your friends. You're not asking people who are not your friends, or asking people a good sample, random sample of the population. There's confirmation bias. This is a significant problem that affects the whole lot of research. We tend to go and find, well, first thing, we tend to float theories that support what we think, and then we go and find evidence that supports what we think. So we try to confirm the beliefs that we already hold. It's a very subtle problem and very difficult to overcome. There are some other things that we can pretty much overcome, and that is the test of repeatability and reproducibility. Repeatability is if I do the same measurement tomorrow, or ask the same question, or gather the same data, similar data tomorrow, will I get the same result? Reproducibility is if someone else goes and measures what I've measured, or gathers the data I've gathered, will they get the same result? And then, of course, there's the problem of data corruption. It's if you're transcribing data, so if you're doing interviews and then transcribing them, then you get corruption, potential corruption there. If you're doing summaries, there's potential corruption. If you're doing mass surveys, you're not always in control of how people actually mark or answer the questions, and they can be corrupted. So the whole idea, if you're doing that kind of thing, is you really must tell the story of your data collection, so people can get some indication of your internal validity. External validity is the degree to which the findings can be generalized. You found out something in a specific circumstance. The question I want to know is, can I apply it in my circumstance? So I need to know the constraints on the findings. So it is actually very rare that findings can be generalized beyond their context. We do it all the time, but at some risk. Now, again, I will warn you, information is expensive, so get it right. All right? Investigation's very much like software development. It's really expensive, and by the time you get to the end, it's too late to conclude you designed it wrong or you did it wrong. You've spent the money. You've got what you've got. So it's better to try and do a little bit of planning before you start, to avoid the embarrassment of coming up with something that's actually not very useful at all.